Could a potential conflict between Iran and Israel trigger a World War III scenario? It's an unthinkable question, yet one that merits serious contemplation. The gravity of such a scenario is immense. It would not only engulf the Middle East in flames, but would also have far-reaching implications across the globe. At the heart of this potential conflict is a deep-rooted tension that has been simmering for decades. The historical context of this tension is as complex as it is enduring. It's a saga of ideological differences, territorial disputes, and power struggles that have time and again pushed these nations to the brink of war. The ripple effects of this potential conflict would be felt worldwide, influencing global politics, economy, and security. It would test alliances, provoke interventions, and could potentially redraw the geopolitical map. To understand the potential of this scenario, it's crucial to unravel the history of this complex relationship. The tension between Iran and Israel is not a new phenomenon. Quite the contrary, it's a long-standing issue that dates back to the establishment of Israel in 1948. The Middle East was irrevocably altered when the State of Israel was created, leading to a series of conflicts and a reshuffling of alliances in the region. In the early years, Iran and Israel maintained a cordial relationship. Iran, under the rule of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was one of the first Muslim-majority countries to recognize Israel. The two nations enjoyed close diplomatic, economic, and military ties. They cooperated in a broad range of areas, from oil trade to intelligence sharing. However, things took a dramatic turn in 1979 with Iran's Islamic Revolution. The Shah's regime was overthrown, and an Islamic Republic was established under the leadership of Ayatollah Khomeini. Israel was denounced as an illegitimate state and an enemy of Islam, marking a stark departure from the friendly relations of the past. This shift in Iran's political stance led to the severance of diplomatic ties between the two nations. Iran's new regime began to openly support groups opposed to Israel, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Israel viewed Iran's radical shift and its pursuit of nuclear capabilities as a significant threat to its existence. Over the years, this tension has manifested in various forms, from covert operations and cyber attacks to heated rhetoric and threats. The animosity between these two nations has only intensified, with no signs of abating. In the early 21st century, Iran's nuclear ambitions further exacerbated the situation. Israel, fearing a nuclear-armed Iran, has been at the forefront of international efforts to curb Iran's nuclear program. This ongoing conflict over nuclear capabilities has added another layer of complexity to the already fraught relationship between these two Middle Eastern powers. The shift in Iran's political landscape drastically altered the dynamics between the two nations, setting a stage for continuous tension. Over the decades, this tension has evolved and escalated, shaping the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and influencing global politics. The global concern about Iran's nuclear capabilities has been a major point of contention. Since the late 20th century, Iran's pursuit of nuclear technology has been a source of unease, not only for Israel, but for the international community at large. The prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran is fraught with potential consequences that could drastically shift the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. Iran's quest for nuclear technology began in earnest in the 1970s under the Shah. However, it was after the Islamic Revolution of 1979 that concerns began to mount. With the new regime's anti-Western rhetoric and its stated commitment to the destruction of Israel, the nuclear program took on a more ominous tone. Israel, for its part, views a nuclear Iran as an existential threat. The Jewish state, which is believed to possess its own nuclear arsenal, has been vocal in its opposition to Iran's nuclear ambitions. This has led to a tense standoff, with Israel threatening military action to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. The international community has not been a silent bystander in this high-stakes drama. The Iran nuclear deal, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was an attempt to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions. Signed in 2015 by Iran and the P5+1 group of world powers, the deal imposed restrictions on Iran's nuclear program in exchange for relief from economic sanctions. However, the deal has been fraught with controversy and its future remains uncertain. Critics argue that it merely postpones Iran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon, while proponents claim it provides a framework for monitoring and preventing such development. The nuclear factor has added a volatile element to the Iran-Israel tension, making it a global concern. The potential for a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, or worse, a nuclear conflict, has made the Iran-Israel standoff a matter of international urgency. As we move forward, how this nuclear factor plays out in the broader Iran-Israel narrative will have far-reaching implications for regional stability and world peace. The conflict between Iran and Israel extends beyond their borders. This statement rings true in the Middle East, where the two countries have taken to the stage of proxy wars, effectively turning the region into a chessboard of strategic maneuvering. Let's delve into the heart of this issue. Syria and Lebanon, two nations that have become the main battlegrounds for these indirect confrontations. Iran, through groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and various militias in Syria, has been able to exert influence and pose a threat to Israel's security, but it's not a one-sided game. Israel, too, has been active, launching airstrikes against Iranian targets in Syria, aiming to curb Iran's growing influence and prevent the establishment of a direct route to transport weapons to Hezbollah. These proxy wars have done more than just amplify regional instability and tension. They've reshaped the landscape of power in the Middle East. It's a high-stakes game of influence and control, where the pieces are not just armies but also political factions, insurgent groups, and even entire populations. The ripple effects of these proxy wars are felt far and wide. They've led to a humanitarian crisis with millions of people displaced from their homes and have ignited sectarian conflicts, further complicating the political situation in the region. These wars have also provided a breeding ground for extremist groups, exacerbating the threat of terrorism. And what about the international community? Well, their responses have varied, but there's a common thread of concern over the escalation of violence and instability. Some nations have chosen to intervene, either directly or indirectly, further muddying the waters of this already complex situation. In essence, these proxy wars have turned the Middle East into a tinderbox. A single spark could ignite a conflict that engulfs the entire region, with far-reaching and potentially devastating consequences. The stakes couldn't be higher. The proxy wars have further fueled the fire between Iran and Israel, escalating their indirect confrontations. This is not just a regional issue, but a global one. The world watches, waits, and wonders, what will be the next move in this high-stakes game of chess? As we stand today, the tension between Iran and Israel is palpable. In recent times, the simmering discord between these two nations has been stoked by a series of incidents. The ongoing cyber warfare, for instance, has seen both nations launching digital attacks against each other, escalating the tension to a whole new level. Then, there's the issue of the shadowy drone wars in the skies above the Middle East, further exacerbating the strained relations. These events haven't occurred in isolation. They are part of a larger chess game being played out on the global stage. Iran's alleged pursuit of nuclear weapons, coupled with Israel's clandestine operations to thwart such efforts, has set the stage for a potential showdown. So, what could be the potential outcomes if this tension escalates into an all-out conflict? Well, they range from bad to worse. On one end of the spectrum, we have a contained conflict where both nations engage in a limited war, causing regional destabilization. This could potentially disrupt global oil supply, sending shockwaves through the world economy. Moving towards the extreme end of the spectrum, we have the nightmare scenario of a full-scale war. This would not only be catastrophic for Iran and Israel, but could also draw in other major powers, igniting a global conflict. The human cost would be immense, and the political repercussions unpredictable. It's important to note that these outcomes aren't inevitable. Diplomacy and dialogue could still de-escalate the situation and lead to peaceful resolution. However, time is running out and the window for such an outcome is rapidly closing. In the midst of this tension, it's clear that the stakes are incredibly high. The fate of not just these two nations but potentially the entire world hangs in the balance. While the world watches with bated breath, the potential outcomes remain uncertain and the stakes incredibly high. The Iran-Israel conflict isn't just a regional issue, it's a global concern. The past 10 minutes have taken us on a journey through history, nuclear fears, proxy wars, and current tensions. We've seen how this conflict, rooted in deep historical and ideological differences, has evolved into a potential flashpoint for a global catastrophe, a World War III scenario. The nuclear factor, with Iran's alleged pursuit of nuclear weapons and Israel's unacknowledged arsenal, adds a terrifying dimension. The shadowy proxy wars, fought in various corners of the Middle East, only complicate the situation further. Today, the tension between these two nations is palpable, with potential outcomes ranging from diplomatic resolution to outright conflict. The importance of diplomatic efforts cannot be overstated in this context. It's not just about preserving peace in the Middle East, it's about preventing a potential global conflagration. As we navigate these uncertain times, the hope remains for diplomacy and dialogue to prevail over conflict and war.